motorsports, whether it's off-road or IndyCar or go-karts or Formula One or what have you.
Yeah. Well, and, let's talk about you a little bit, because you're one of the few guys, a lot of guys, they're scared to kind of branch out, and you've kind of become like one of those everymans, like I'll drive anything with wheels, and obviously you're in IndyCar. We see you at 24 Hours of Daytona. You've gone and done the Baja 1000 with Honda. You went down to Australia and did some supercar racing. Like, seems like you just genuinely enjoy driving anything, and you like kind of putting yourself out of your element, so you can learn a little bit. I that's one thing I've always admired. Like, you're one of those guys like a Mario Andretti and, and a Robbie Gordon, and there's quite a few. I mean, it looks like Fernando Alonso's kind of got into that, where he just wants to drive everything, but I feel like you as a driver, you just like being behind the wheel.
I do. Yes. It's kind of funny how it all happened. I'll admit, I never really went out looking for any of it. Except for probably Baja, because, I've been a fan of that event for a long time. And when I met Jeff Proctor back in 2017, I kind of alluded to the fact that I'd love to race for him one day. And he was like, okay, we'll stay in touch and we'll see if we can make it happen type thing. But, the thing in Australia came about because, Michael Andretti has a partnership with a V8 team down there. And it's called Walkinshaw Andretti United, and they were running a kind of a third car for the Bathurst 1000, which is their Indy 500 over there. And they were running kind of I don't know what the correct term is anymore, but like a wild card car. And so when Michael asked if I'd be willing to do it, obviously for sure, like I'm not ever going to say no to something like that. And then the endurance stuff with Acura Team Penske, that all came through Honda. So after, we were starting to have a lot of really good success in IndyCar and winning races together and, fighting for championships, everyone at HPD and Honda was happy. And they had a need for a third driver for the endurance events, the 24 Hours Daytona, 12 Hours Sebring, Petit Le Mans, et cetera. And so, they asked if I'd be willing to do that. And you're never going to, pass up an opportunity to drive for Team Penske in a class leading car, because, ultimately, there's a lot of opportunities to drive in Daytona in different classes and go for class wins, but the opportunity to go for an outright, victory in one of those endurance events doesn't come along very often. And that if you're driving for Team Penske, it's going to be good equipment. So that was an easy decision as well. So I've been very fortunate to kind of have these things come together and then fall into my lap in a way. And, it's just funny timing how it all kind of happened at the same time, with Baja, my debut there in 2018, and then Daytona coming quickly thereafter that in 2019, and then Bathurst in October of 2019. So it's been a wild ride, and look forward to continuing it. And hopefully we can get some wins in at least one of those things pretty soon.
Yeah. How weird is it for you to be walking into a Penske garage? Because 95% of the time, obviously you're competing against them on track. How weird is it for you all of a sudden to be wearing a Penske driver's suit and walking into that garage area?
It was strange for, I think, everyone, me, them, my team, Andretti Autosport and IndyCar. Like, everyone was like, how's this going to work? But, Team Penske is a very big organization. And so every time that I go to the shop, every time that, I'm on conference calls or whatever, everyone gets it. Like, everyone's super respectful of each other's kind of place, and there's no crossover in engineers either. So It's really easy to just not talk about IndyCar, other than socially, right? So there's never a feeling that, I'm being put in a weird place or they're being put in a weird place and having to hide things. It's a very different kind of program. It's just kind of the name is there. So it's the weirdest part is, Team Penske is a very kind of corporate business type kind of look. And so for those events, like, I actually shave my face, and, all of my Andretti mechanics love to break my balls about that every time that I come to an IndyCar event after one of the Penske tests or races or whatever. And they're like, oh, I see how it is type thing. It's like, they just love to give me crap about it. But at the end of the day, it's a uniform, right? So you kind of got to oblige by each team's rules, if you will.
Yeah. Well, going back to talking about 24 Hours of Daytona, I want to ask you, because I think we're going back to like 2014, 15. I can't remember the year, but you drove, out of all the weird things you've driven, you drove a Delta Wing, dude. How was that? Because those things are, one, they're just bizarre to look at, but that has to drive like unlike anything you've ever been behind the wheel of, right?
It was horrible. I'll be honest. I'm not even going to be politically correct. It was one of the worst things I think I've ever driven. It was very fast around Daytona. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, we qualified fourth overall, like outright. Like, it was fast. I think it was like somewhere near 15 miles an hour quicker than the DP cars in the straight line. And then kind of gave all that time back up in the infield, but it was just a rocket ship on the oval. So it was unique. It was very ahead of its time in a lot of ways. And ultimately, it didn't work because, race cars should have, there's a certain element of physics that work for a race car. Yeah. And this kind of tried to defy it all. And while it had moments of speed, it ultimately just wasn't a very well-balanced, well-performing car in corners or braking. It was just a rocket ship in a straight line. So I think had it ever made it to Le Mans, which honestly was its original intention, or even Indianapolis for a period of time, that was going to be the new Indy car, I think it would have been exceptionally fast. But for what it was trying to do in IMSA in America on road courses, it was not made for it in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Well, talking about all these different series, things you've driven, at this point, is there anything out there where you'd still like to drive it, or any events, one-off events? Is there any bucket lists like down the road, like you're going, at some point it'd be kind of fun to go and do that?
I want to do more of the desert races. It's unfortunate that the scheduling doesn't really allow for anything except for the 1000. Yeah. Unfortunate may be a wrong word, because ultimately I think that's the best race you can do. But, I'd love to do some other desert races. And then also, I've never driven a cup car. I'm not saying that I'm looking to do that anytime soon, but definitely before, I hang up the racing helmet, I'd love to do some events in NASCAR and some of the restrictor plate tracks, because as wild as it looks pretty awesome as well.
Yeah. Any you ever? I know you and Ron Capps are buddies. You ever told Capps, "Hey, I'd like to try my hand at your funny car"?
There is not a chance in hell I would ever get in a funny car. He's talked to me about it. Like, they have a 2-seater one, and no way. Yeah. Not interested.
Yeah, and it's funny because Antron Brown and Steve Torrance and Capps are all good friends of mine, but I was out at the NHRA race in Phoenix. You can sit in a car like Antron's or something like that, and sit in there, and I just go, this is another level of crazy. I'm just like, there's something about Top Fuel and Funny Car that I appreciate what they do, and you look at those in-cars and the forces, and like, I'm kind of with you. Like, I have zero interest in trying that. Like, no, just don't. I don't know. It's hard to say.
It's a whole nother level of crazy, man. Like, if you haven't been, you could kind of maybe wrap your head around it. Like, yeah, that's really fast, or yeah, that's crazy, but yeah, I could do it type thing because I'm a badass or whatever. The moment you go there and you start crying when they turn the engine on because the nitromethane fumes are so much, it's like, yep, not made for this. Not going to do it. Not interested. So huge amount of respect to those guys. Ron's a good buddy of mine. And what's amazing to me about Ron, and probably it applies to most of those guys, is as much as they ultimately drive straight for 4 seconds, they're all very good at like driving cars. Like, I went to a karting event with Ron, and it was me, Ron, Chase Elliott. There's a Napa event in Florida, and Ron was by far the best. And then, looking at some of Ron's results and kind of sprint cars and stuff, like he's like a wheelman. He's a badass. So it's crazy to think that, these guys that are, on paper, it looks like what they're doing is simple. There's a huge amount of talent that applies to road racing and oval racing as well. So it's something that a lot of people, I think, don't appreciate as much as they should.
Yeah. No, it's funny you say that because, 2-3 years ago, I had Antron Brown and Steve Torrance come out with my Razor Star Car program, and they came to the Mint, and we put them behind the wheel in a desert race, and they went out and testing, and we've got our test track and things like that. And Antron had done a little motocross, and Steve had too in their past, but most of it had always been drag racing. But same thing you just said about Caps. They got behind the wheel, and their times weren't far off from mine. I went, wow, like it was kind of unexpected. Like I thought, oh, they're going to be competent. No, they were quick. They legitimately had crazy car control, but you look at those in-cars like a Top Fuel and a funny car, and and I think a lot of people think they just go in a straight line, but I'm sure you've seen them. They're actually driving. I mean, there's a lot of hand movement. There's a lot that's going on in those cars, and I think, like you'd said, I don't think they get enough credit, for what they actually do.
Oh, for sure not. So it's cool to watch them out of their element, and it's also awesome to watch them at the actual races as well.
Yeah. So obviously, kind of winding things down here, but what's next for you, man? What do you got going? What's keeping you busy the next few weeks until obviously we got a little bit of iRacing to do, and you got a bourbon collection to keep you busy. But what else is on tap for Alex Rossi, and keeping you? I guess I guess you're still working out, things like that. I mean, there's a lot you got to do to be ready when IndyCar says, "Boom, hey, we're going racing."
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's still. I mean, it's just kind of an extended off season. So it's just an extended off season without seeing people. So training's the same. I have a gym at my house, and so I'm able to do the same programs at home. There's no restrictions against riding your bikes, and the weather is actually turned in Indianapolis. So I've already been on a couple of rides. So it's really just much of the same. Just probably. More free time to do weird things like sim racing. And, I ordered a guitar, so I'm going to learn how to at least attempt to learn how to play a guitar. So, it's a time for hobbies, I guess, which you would usually do in October or November when the season's winding down. We're just doing it on the front end of the season this time.
Yeah. Never really thought about it that way, but, it's definitely the truth. But, man, I appreciate you taking the time, Alex. Fun to catch up again. And, I guess I'm sure we'll be in touch. I know if things go back racing, I'll be out at Indy for the month of May. So I'm sure we'll see you there at Indianapolis Motor Speedway at some point.
Right on, man. Look forward to it. Take care of yourself.
Oh, man, Alex does not disappoint. Fun times with him, and we got fun times still to come here on Project Action. Right now, we're going to roll into an interview with my good friend Dave Mason with Bet Online. All right, I'd like to welcome one of my guests this week to Project Action on Podcast One, my good friend Dave Mason with Bet Online. Dave, man, I know obviously we had you on a week back, and we were talking a little bit about sports and some of the betting, and you guys are still offering quite a bit there at Bet Online. But this week we're going to switch gears a little bit because we still have a massive blockbuster sporting event that is going on. It's a little bit different than normal. Normally we're used to sold-out arenas for WrestleMania. This year they're actually doing it kind of a private, intimate setting. But WrestleMania is happening. Bet Online, you guys are still carrying the bets.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, a lot of sports books shy away from professional wrestling, and not us, luckily. We're lucky to have one of our guys on the stage who's a humongous fan. He loves it. It's his passion is wrestling, WWE. So, about a year and a half ago, he's like, well, what do you guys think about me starting to offer professional wrestling odds? We're like, go for it, man. And he does it every big event, and he's actually expanding on it now that, a lot of sports are on hiatus. He's putting up, Monday Night Raw and all that good stuff. So he's churning out a ton of odds. So he has a great offering for this weekend's WrestleMania.
Well, and I guess that is a pretty interesting concept because wrestling, especially WWE, they've got some mainstream pop recently, and airing on Fox, and I know ESPN's, picking up some stuff, and, it seems like mainstream media and sports media has really started kind of covering it. But, you and I both know it's World Wrestling Entertainment where some of this stuff and most of it's predetermined before the matches go. But us sitting at home, we don't know what those are. We don't know what the predetermination is. So I guess there's still room to bet, right?
Yeah, and we have our own measures for stuff like that. It's not the only thing that we offer that's predetermined. A lot of these reality series, we offer odds on those. That Jeopardy GOAT tournament they had a few months back, that's a great example. And they taped it in November, and I don't think they aired it until January. And it leaked to one, and people are betting that. So what do you do? What does sportsbook do when you're offering stuff like that? We keep the limits somewhat low, right? We will keep the limits to $50 to $100, whereas we're offering $50,000 limits on an NFL game something like WrestleMania, it's going to be 50 to 100.